Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 1. Today we are going to continue our discussion of feudalism in the Middle Ages. But specifically we're going to focus on feudalism and the church. There are a number of terms that I have identified from this lecture that I think you should know by the time you're done. And there are a couple of questions at the end. So please take note of these things and let's get started. We're going to start today's class in the year 1000 CE. By 1000 CE, Western civilization in Europe was organized primarily along the tenets of feudalism. We said earlier that feudalism developed out of a need for protection. These foreign tribes, Magyars, Vikings, and Muslims, swept through Europe in the 9th century, pillaging, raping, and killing the local populations. To protect themselves, the people huddled together in communities known as manors, which were overseen by powerful landlords. The landlords hired professional armies to protect these communities, and in return they expected something from their people. Over time, this system evolved to include a king or a monarch who was often initially simply the most powerful of the various landlords. This diagram explains the various feudal relationships that governed life for millions of people across Europe. Let's begin on the right side of the drawing, which shows where the right to rule came from. At the top sat the king, who controlled much of the land within his realm. Land within a feudal society meant wealth and power. Here's why. The king could reward loyal followers with gifts of land, known as fiefs. In return, the nobles could give their land to knights, professional soldiers who then fought for them. They also could give pieces of the land to the peasants, so that the peasants could grow food which they could support themselves. But feudalism is all about relationships and obligation, as I explained in class. These obligations are outlined on the left side of the diagram. The peasants, in exchange for the privilege of using their landlord's land, owed rent, taxes, and labor to the nobles and knights above them. Moreover, the knights owed their lords military service. Finally, the nobles would occasionally be called upon to loan their knights to the king in times of great need. Feudal societies were highly decentralized. Now, what does that mean? It means that power was dispersed or spread out among the various levels in society. The king may have been the head of his realm, but nobles also wielded considerable power based on their family landholdings and the size of their armies. In fact, some nobles, if they got rich enough, could challenge the power of the king. Farther down the hierarchy, the knights also wielded some power due to their lands. Only the peasants were virtually powerless in these societies. But where did the church fit into this feudal society? Well, by 1000 CE, the Muslim threat from Spain and North Africa had been halted. Meanwhile, the Magyars and the Vikings have ceased their attacks. Many of them have settled down and have begun to assimilate into the local culture. For most of them, that meant becoming Christian. But the church also faced a new threat. That new threat happened to be the nobles or landlords. Now, the nobility often used their armies of knights not only to protect the peasants who lived on their manor or to loan their knights to the king in times of need, but they also occasionally used their knights to rob and pillage church property. The church had a great deal of property, largely because people would often will their lands, their wealth, or their possessions to the church when they died. In this way, they hoped to earn favor with God and win a place in heaven. Unfortunately, this wealth also made churches and monasteries very attractive targets for those looking for quick wealth. But the nobility also attacked the church in other ways. One of the greatest problems was something known as simony. Wealthy and powerful nobles or landlords would appoint their friends and relatives to powerful positions within the church. In other cases, they made money by auctioning off positions in the church to the highest bidder. It didn't matter if the people who are now serving as bishops or priests or even cardinals had any church training or training in theology. The church was powerless to stop them. Thus, by 1000 CE, the church was being run by priests, bishops, and cardinals who cared nothing for Christianity or for the salvation of souls. Instead, they cared only about lining their own pockets with wealth. Even the Pope himself might be such an appointment in some cases. Popes often received their position due to their connections to powerful noble families, not due to their connection with God. This will begin to change in the 11th century, and one of the men leading the charge was Pope Gregory VII. Pope Gregory VII argued that the church must be free and independent from the control of the nobility. His rallying cry was Libertas Ecclesia, or freedom for the church. Gregory based his revolt on the understanding of the true power of the church. That power lay in the important role the church played in the lives of average Christians. Now think about it. The church baptized you when you were born. The church married you. The church buried you when you died. Now, the Pope argued that if simony was allowed to continue, that leaders who obtained their positions simply due to the fact that their relative was a powerful nobleman, or worse yet, that they had simply bought that position because they were the highest bidder in an auction. He argued that these people simply could not represent God, Jesus, or the church. Thus, children baptized by these church officials who again had obtained their positions through simony, children baptized by these officials might not actually be baptized. Couples married by these men might not actually be married, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, you've got to understand how frightening that prospect was for Christians living in the Middle Ages. It was very important that a child be properly baptized when they were born, because should that child die, if they weren't baptized, they wouldn't go to heaven. They wouldn't obtain salvation. And so what Gregory is saying here, is that if we allow simony to continue, we are putting the souls of Christians in danger. So, what did Gregory do? Well, first, he ended the practice of simony. Only properly trained men could achieve positions of power within the church. This also ensured that church appointments would be loyal to the church first, and the nobility second. To make this reform stick, he asserted the right of the church to excommunicate anyone thought to be living in violation of church teaching. Excommunication meant banning a person from participating in Holy Communion. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, essentially, if you ban someone from Holy Communion, you are banning them from heaven. Again, that is a powerful tool, a powerful weapon to use in a society where the only access you might have to heaven is through the church. Another weapon wielded by Gregory and the church was something known as the interdict. When the Pope issued an interdict against a specific region, it would forbid priests within that region from administering the sacraments within their churches. These sacraments would be things like baptism, marriage, or Holy Communion. In other words, these sacraments would stop within those churches and within that region. Think about what this meant. Without the sacraments, this would put the salvation of hundreds and even thousands of people in danger. Thus, Gregory correctly reasoned that people who feared for the loss of their salvation would often pressure their lords to give in to the church. In this way, the church could use the interdict to control entire kingdoms. All right, in conclusion, by the end of the 11th century, the church has become a powerful player in feudal Europe. In our next lesson, we're going to see how the church is going to use that power to go to war.